On a quiet Sunday afternoon, under the golden glow of a setting sun, a black luxury sedan sat idly on the side of a winding country road. The vehicle was unmistakably opulent, with polished rims that gleamed even in the fading light. Yet it had been brought to a halt by something as mundane as a flat tire. The driver, a man in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and a tailored suit, paced beside the car with an air of frustration. This was no ordinary man. He was Thomas Harrington, a self-made billionaire, known worldwide for his sprawling tech empire and famously busy schedule. Thomas looked at his phone. No signal. He let out an exasperated sigh. How ironic, he thought, that the man who pioneered global connectivity couldn't call for help when he needed it. As he stood there, contemplating his options, a faint sound broke through the stillness. The rhythmic squeak of bicycle wheels grew louder, accompanied by the soft hum of a child's voice singing a carefree tune. Over the crest of the hill appeared a little girl, no older than 10, riding a slightly battered pink bicycle. She had curly brown hair tied into two messy pigtails, her freckled face glowing with the innocence of youth. She stopped abruptly upon seeing the car and the frustrated man beside it. Her big brown eyes widened as she took in the scene. "Hi, mister. Do you need help?" she asked, her voice sweet and curious. Thomas's initial instinct was to dismiss her. What could a child possibly do to help him? But something in her earnest gaze stopped him. "Well," he began, his voice laced with sarcasm, "unless you have a spare tire in that bike of yours, I don't think so." The girl giggled. "No, silly, but I can try to help. My dad taught me how to fix bike tires. Maybe it's kind of the same?" Thomas raised an eyebrow, a bemused smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "And what's your name, little mechanic?" "Emily," she said proudly. "What's yours?" "Thomas," he replied, deliberately omitting his last name. He wasn't in the mood to explain his fame to a child. Emily hopped off her bike and knelt by the flat tire, her small hands inspecting it with surprising confidence. "Looks like you ran over a nail. Do you have a spare?" Thomas sighed. "Yes, but I've never changed a tire myself. That's what roadside assistance is for." Emily gave him a look that was equal parts amused and incredulous. "Well, you're gonna learn today," she said matter-of-factly. Her determination was infectious. Together, they retrieved the spare tire and tools from the trunk. Emily guided Thomas step by step, explaining the process with the same confidence as a seasoned instructor. She made him loosen the lug nuts, jack up the car, and replace the tire, all while standing nearby with her hands on her hips, watching like a tiny supervisor. "See? That wasn't so hard," she said, brushing dirt off her hands when the job was done. Thomas chuckled, his earlier frustration melting away. "You're quite the little boss, aren't you?" Emily grinned. "My mom says I have a lot of leadership potential." Thomas couldn't help but smile. This scrappy, confident kid had turned what could have been a miserable afternoon into something unexpectedly delightful. As he dusted off his hands, he noticed Emily's bike had a broken reflector, and the tires were nearly bald. "Emily, why don't you have a proper bike?" he asked, his tone softening. Emily shrugged. "It's my big sister's old one. Dad says we'll get a new one when he gets extra money, but I like this one. It still works." Thomas's chest tightened. He'd built a fortune by solving problems. Yet here was a family for whom something as simple as a new bike was a financial stretch. Emily didn't seem to mind, though. She exuded a contentment that was foreign to him, despite all his wealth. "Emily," he said thoughtfully, "do you and your family live nearby?" She nodded and pointed down the road. "Just a little ways that way. You should come meet my mom and dad. They're really nice." Thomas hesitated. He wasn't in the habit of making social calls, especially unplanned ones. But something about Emily's cheerful demeanor made him curious. Against his usual instincts, he agreed. The two of them walked back to her house, Thomas pushing the bike while Emily chatted away about her school, her favorite books, and how she wanted to be an astronaut one day. When they arrived at a modest, weathered home, Emily's parents greeted them warmly. Her father, a mechanic with grease-stained hands, and her mother, a nurse in scrubs, immediately thanked Thomas for walking their daughter home safely. Thomas shook his head. "Actually, it's me who should thank her. She helped me fix my car." As they shared laughs and stories over lemonade, Thomas was struck by the warmth and generosity of this family. Despite their humble circumstances, they radiated a happiness he hadn't felt in years. By the time he left, he knew he couldn't just walk away from this encounter and forget it. The next morning, Thomas made a few calls. By the end of the week, a brand new bike with Emily's name on it was delivered to their home, along with a scholarship fund to cover her education through college. But that was just the beginning. Inspired by Emily's kindness and the simple values her family embodied, Thomas launched a new foundation focused on providing educational opportunities and resources to underprivileged children across the country. When the Harrington Education Initiative was announced, reporters asked him what had inspired the idea. Thomas smiled and said, "Sometimes it takes a small act of kindness to remind you of what really matters. For me, that reminder came from a little girl with a big heart and a broken bike." Emily's family became lifelong friends of Thomas, and her story became a symbol of how even the smallest gestures can create ripples of change far beyond what we imagine. As for Emily, she never let go of her dream of becoming an astronaut, and with Thomas's support, she had every chance to make it a reality. Years passed, and the bond between Thomas and Emily's family deepened. True to her dreams, Emily excelled in school, her natural curiosity and drive propelling her toward every opportunity Thomas's foundation helped provide. But her ambitions weren't the only thing that grew. Her relationship with Thomas evolved into one of mutual respect and mentorship. When Emily turned 16, she was invited to speak at one of the Harrington Education Initiative's annual galas. Standing on a grand stage in front of an audience filled with philanthropists, business leaders, and educators, she wore a bright smile that radiated confidence. "When I was a little girl," she began, "I didn't know what a billionaire was. I just knew Thomas as the man who needed help changing a tire." Her audience chuckled warmly. "But what he taught me that day, and in every moment since, is that kindness isn't about what you have, but what you give. And because of his generosity, I'm standing here today, chasing my dream to become an astronaut." Thunderous applause erupted, and among the claps and cheers, Thomas felt a lump rise in his throat. Seeing Emily thrive was a reminder of why he'd chosen to shift his priorities and focus on giving back. For years, his life had been about accumulating wealth and power. Now it was about something far greater. Emily's journey to space was not without challenges. Despite her talents and determination, she faced setbacks and roadblocks that would have deterred many. But with Thomas's guidance and her family's unwavering support, she persevered. By the time she was 24, she had earned a degree in aerospace engineering and secured a coveted spot in a prestigious astronaut training program. During her training, Emily often reflected on the serendipitous meeting that had changed her life. She carried with her the lessons Thomas had taught, not just about hard work, but about the importance of staying grounded and giving back. Meanwhile, Thomas's foundation continued to expand. Inspired by Emily's progress, he launched new initiatives focusing on STEM education for girls, providing scholarships, mentorship, and resources to encourage young women to pursue careers in science and technology. Years later, the world watched as Emily Harrington, now a fully fledged astronaut, prepared for her first mission to space. The Harrington family and Thomas himself were in the front row of the viewing gallery at the launch site. As the countdown began, Thomas couldn't help but marvel at how far she'd come. The rocket soared into the sky, carrying Emily and her crewmates toward the stars. For Thomas, it was a moment of profound pride and fulfillment. A simple act of kindness had not only changed Emily's life, but had also redefined his own. The legacy of their bond continued to inspire countless others. Emily's story was featured in documentaries and books, highlighting the power of mentorship and the ripple effect of small, selfless acts. As for Thomas, he remained a steadfast supporter of education and innovation, dedicating the latter years of his life to ensuring that the next generation would have opportunities to dream big, just like Emily. In the end, it was a flat tire and a little girl's unyielding spirit that reminded Thomas Harrington of the one thing his billions couldn't buy: the immeasurable joy of making a difference. Years passed, and as Emily's journey unfolded, Thomas's life was equally transformed. What started as a chance encounter on a quiet country road had evolved into a profound partnership, one grounded in purpose, generosity, and a deep commitment to making a lasting difference in the world. The Harrington Education Initiative, founded in Emily's honor, continued to expand its reach, touching thousands of lives across the country. But Thomas knew that even with all his resources and influence, the fight to bridge the educational gap was far from over. He spent countless hours strategizing with experts, attending conferences, and connecting with educators and policymakers, always looking for new ways to improve access to education for underserved communities. But despite his successes, there was a quiet part of Thomas's heart that remained restless. As much as he had accomplished in his career, as much as he had given, there was always the question, had he done enough? Was this the legacy he truly wanted to leave? Emily's meteoric rise into the space program offered him a glimpse into what the future could hold. Her accomplishments were nothing short of extraordinary, but she wasn't the only one benefiting from his foundation's support. There were countless other young men and women, each with their own unique story, fighting their own battles and striving to break free from the circumstances of their birth. Thomas had come to realize that it wasn't just about giving people the tools to succeed. It was about empowering them to believe in themselves, to overcome the obstacles life threw in their path, and to reach for their own stars. One day, as Thomas sat in his office, reviewing reports from the Foundation's latest initiatives, his phone buzzed with a message from Emily. It had been a while since they'd spoken. She was always so busy with her training and her work. But today, her message was different. "Hi, Thomas. Just wanted to let you know that I've been selected for the mission. I'm officially going to space in a few months." The words hit Thomas with a rush of emotion. For years, he had supported Emily from afar, watching her grow from the little girl with a broken bike to a woman on the verge of making history. But now she was about to embark on the ultimate journey, one that would take her beyond the confines of Earth itself. He immediately called her, his heart swelling with pride. "Emily, I don't even know what to say," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "Don't say anything. I know how you feel," Emily laughed. "You've been a part of this journey every step of the way." They spoke for a while, catching up on everything from her training to the preparations for her mission. But as the conversation ended, Emily's tone turned more serious. "Thomas, there's something I've been thinking about," she said. "You've given me everything, education, support, mentorship, but I want to give something back. I want to continue your work. I want to help others, just like you helped me." Thomas felt a lump rise in his throat. He had always known that Emily was special, but to hear her express this desire to pay it forward was more than he could have imagined. She had not only embraced the opportunities he had given her, but she had also internalized the values of kindness, generosity, and service that he had come to cherish. "I don't know what to say," he replied, his voice trembling. "I've never been more proud of you, Emily." "Don't get emotional, old man," she teased. "You've still got a lot of work to do, and I've got a mission to prepare for. But when I come back from space, we'll talk more about this, okay?" Thomas agreed, his heart full. He knew that Emily's journey was only just beginning, and that her impact would extend far beyond the boundaries of Earth. The idea that she might one day lead her own initiatives, inspired by his foundation and her own experiences, filled him with hope for the future. Months later, the day of Emily's launch arrived. It was a crisp, clear morning at the launch site, and the air was electric with excitement. Thomas stood with Emily's family, watching as the countdown clock ticked down. The rocket, sleek and powerful, stood ready on the launch pad, preparing to take its crew to the stars. As the final seconds counted down, Emily looked out over the crowd and caught sight of Thomas, standing just a few yards away. Their eyes met, and in that moment, there was a silent understanding between them, a bond that transcended words. The rocket roared to life, and Emily's mission to space began. For Thomas, the sight of the rocket lifting off into the sky was a moment of indescribable pride. But it was also a moment of profound realization. He had given Emily the tools to succeed, but she had taken those tools and forged her own path. She was no longer just a beneficiary of his generosity. She had become a force for change in her own right. As the mission progressed, and Emily shared her experiences from space, Thomas found himself more and more inspired by her bravery and determination. Every message she sent from orbit, every story she told, reminded him of why he had chosen to dedicate his life to helping others. And as he watched her break new ground in the field of aerospace, he knew that the future was in good hands. Years passed, and Emily's legacy continued to grow. She completed several successful missions to space, becoming a trailblazer for women in STEM and inspiring generations of young girls to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Her work in space exploration was groundbreaking, but it was her commitment to education and mentorship that truly set her apart. Through her own foundation, the Emily Harrington Foundation, she provided scholarships, mentorship, and opportunities for young people from all walks of life. She worked tirelessly to ensure that every child, regardless of their background, had the chance to reach for the stars. One day, as Emily stood on the stage at an international space exploration conference, she was invited to give a keynote address. The audience, filled with scientists, astronauts, and engineers from around the world, eagerly awaited her words. "As I look out at all of you," she began, her voice steady and confident, "I'm reminded of a time when I was just a little girl, riding my broken bike down a country road. I had no idea what a billionaire was, but I knew what kindness was. And that kindness changed my life." The room fell silent, and then, with thunderous applause, the audience erupted in cheers. "I wouldn't be here today without the support of my family, my mentors, and most of all, Thomas Harrington. He didn't just give me a chance, he taught me that the only limit to what we can achieve is the one we place on ourselves." Thomas, sitting in the front row, felt a tear slip down his cheek. He had never imagined that the simple act of helping a little girl change a tire would lead to this, a world-changing legacy that would inspire countless others to dream big and reach for the stars. And as Emily spoke about the importance of education, mentorship, and giving back, Thomas knew that his own journey was complete. The future was bright, and it was being shaped by the kindness and generosity that had started with a flat tire on a quiet Sunday afternoon. In the years that followed, Thomas's foundation continued to thrive, supporting countless children and young adults who, like Emily, dared to dream beyond their circumstances. And as the world watched Emily Harrington break barriers in space, Thomas couldn't help but smile, knowing that sometimes the smallest gestures have the power to change the world.